Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show. Today with me I have the Campfire Audio Atlas IEM. Let's check it out. Okay, so the Atlas is a premium IEM, and unlike the other Campfire Audio IEMs I've tried, it's not using a hybrid multi-driver configuration. Instead, it's utilizing a simpler single dynamic driver setup, sort of like the IE900 from Sennheiser. As always, we'll get this review underway by checking out the Atlas's accessories. Despite the packaging being quite small, the Atlas comes with a rather generous set of accessories. For starters, there is a black leather Campfire Audio case, which is compact and easily pocketable thanks to its low profile. Then, as expected from a Campfire Audio product, there is a great assortment of ear tips, with 3 sets of Campfire Audio silicone tips in small, medium, and large, 3 sets of Campfire Audio marshmallow foam tips also in small, medium, and large, and 5 sets of final audio silicone tips ranging from extra small to extra large. Lastly, there is a cleaning tool included, as well as a Campfire Audio 3.5mm to dual MMCX silver lit cable. Moving on to build and comfort, like other Campfire Audio IEMs, the Atlas has an impressive build that exhibits solid craftsmanship and material work. It features a stainless steel body that is curiously identical for both earpieces, which means that it doesn't matter which earpiece you connect to the left or right channel since they're symmetrical. Something that surprised me about the Atlas though was that despite having an all-metal build and a fairly large chassis, it remained lightweight. For comfort, I found the Atlas to be quite disappointing. For one reason or another, I was unable to ever get a really secure fit with them. Due to their symmetrical design, the lack of an ear hook on the cable, and also because of their weight being shifted towards the connector end of the unit, I would occasionally feel as though the Atlas were trying to fall out of my ears when listening, so they definitely weren't very secure. Then, I found that the hard edges that surround the body could prove uncomfortable, as over time they'd applied quite a bit of pressure on my ears. Of course, we all have differently shaped ears and ear canals, so this may not be an issue for you, but for me, these comfort issues were what detracted the most from my time with the Atlas. Okay, so now let's talk about sound, and as I mentioned earlier, the Atlas is utilizing a full-range 10mm dynamic driver that's paired alongside Campfire Audio's amorphous diamond-like carbon diaphragm. Having recently heard the Polaris, which admittedly I found to be disappointing, I was really surprised by the Atlas. Overall, I'd say that it still leans towards being a warm headphone, but it's significantly more balanced. It still has a few quirks, particularly in the bass and treble regions, but I actually found myself enjoying the Atlas's tonality nonetheless. Starting off with the bass, I've described the Atlas as having a fun bass response. It's certainly boosted in the lows, but it's nowhere close to having the kind of bass shelf that the Polaris had. I find that for this kind of sound signature, it actually has an adequate level of presence under 150 Hz, which gives it a satisfying rumble as well as plenty of mid-bass warmth. Unlike the Polaris, I did not find the bass level to be disruptive of other frequency ranges, although if I have one comment to make is that I think that the bass shelf could have settled earlier. To me, it sounds as though the bass shelf on the Atlas drags slightly into the upper bass and the lower mids, which unfortunately resulted in the bass response losing some of its cleanliness, and it could occasionally sound a bit bloated. Other than that though, I think that it's a very enjoyable and deep bass response. Moving along to the mids, I did find that the Atlas had a good and relaxed mid-range. However, because the upper bass does bleed slightly into the lower mids, I did occasionally feel as though fundamental tones could sound a bit bloated, and things such as vocals felt as though they had a slightly artificially enriched body. Still, I feel like it's somewhat compensated for this with its upper mid-range, which had a good level of energy and presence between 2 to 5K to contour the mids. Despite not being what I described as a reference mid-range, I think the Atlas sees a significant upgrade over the Polaris in this regard, and as a result, it makes for a much more organic listen. Lastly, for frequency response, we have the highs, and one of the issues I have with the Polaris was that despite being an extremely warm headphone, it had a very aggressive peak at around 6K. Now, the Atlas still has some bite to it at around that frequency band, but it's significantly subdued by comparison. So between 5.5 to 6K, there was the slightest bit of glare, and it definitely did exhibit occasionally some lower treble sibilance, but it was fairly subtle, and I didn't find it to make the Atlas harsh at all. So even though it was a little lacking in upper treble extension, I think that overall the Atlas had a good treble region that was non-fatiguing, and it properly reproduced the harmonics and overtones that are in this region of the frequency response. Okay, so now let's talk about technical performance, and as always we'll start off with resolution. And I have to say that for detail retrieval and overall sense of image clarity, I was a bit let down by the Atlas. It's not to say that it's not a resolving IEM, as it did have good structural definition, and instrument lines were well textured. However, there wasn't as big as an upgrade as I would have expected over something like the Juno SA6, which pretty much delivers the same performance, but it costs nearly half the price. So it's not that its performance is bad for its internal resolution. However, for the price bracket it's in, it's really nothing special. Then, as for Soundstage imaging and layering, I personally found the Soundstage presentation on the Atlas to be quite good for an IEM. For me, it felt more spacious than the SA6 and was closer to something like the IE900, of which Soundstage I love. Additionally, it had precise imaging with great left-right localization. I actually tried playing some online FPS games with these, and I had no issues discerning the exact positioning and directionality of sound. Then as for layering, it did a pretty good job at keeping all instrument and vocal lines clean and spatially distinguished. In this regard, I think that it's one of the better performing IEMs I've listened to, and was definitely one of its standout qualities for me. For dynamics, the Atlas is using a dynamic driver, so unsurprisingly it delivers a pretty good sense of punch and slam. In the lower registers, it provides a satisfying impact that not many IEMs I've tried can produce. Additionally, the Atlas is adept at reproducing the tactility of instruments with a weighty snap and attack that gives instruments a more lively quality. Needless to say, the Atlas is very energetic, and in this regard I think that it is sure to satisfy the listeners looking for an engaging IEM. Okay, so now to wrap up this review. Looking at just the Atlas, I think it's a solid IEM. I personally had comfort issues with it, but ultimately I found it to have an enjoyable tonality, good technical performance, and a great build. In the context of the current IEM market though, with brands like Moondrop, Juno, and The Audio serving up IEMs that are just as good, if not better at half the price, it's really hard to make an argument in its favor. If it was available at around the $600 price range, then maybe I think it would be a solid option to have, especially for those who are looking for a warmer and more relaxed sounding IEM. As it stands though, I think that even at its sale price of $899, it's not really worth it when you can get just as much sound for significantly less cash. Anyways, that is all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the Atlas or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to the Headphone Show, and until next time, this is Chrono signing off.